My name is Rick Finley. I am a territory manager in Southern California. I cover North LA all the way up the Central Coast to Paso Robles. I have been with BMD as a Marvin rep for over 4 years. And then before that, I was, as we were just chatting about, I was a dealer salesperson in North Carolina for 6 years. And I actually was a Marvin dealer at one of the places I worked, and that's where I fell in love with Marvin, and I really loved the brand. And when I got to California, one of the things I was interested in was possibly working as a Marvin rep. And thankfully, BMD had a position open, and here we are. So I'll kick it over to my co-presenter, Matthew Delaney.
Hello, good morning, or good afternoon. Good afternoon. I should change my slide. My name is Matthew Delaney. I am the one of the territory managers in the East Bay of the Bay Area, and I have about 2 years experience with BMD. BMD being the distributor of Marvin product in the state of California, and for I'd say over 20 years, I have been working in the fenestration world. Most of those 20 years has been with custom windows and doors. That's the rope and pulley or the push-out casement window or push-out awning window made from solid mahogany. That's typically what we're using. But for 15 of those years, I was also selling Marvin windows and doors. And I guess about 15 years ago, I went on my first war road trip with Greg Delmar, who was my TM at that time, and basically fell in love with Marvin product as well. I loved, seeing how they manufactured and seeing the technology, the engineering that went into their products was just amazing. Okay, today's material, I potentially think it might be a little bit dry for some people, but for the window nerds out there, I think they're going to really appreciate what we have going on here. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Matthew. And then before we jump in, we have as our kind of behind the scenes guy, Alex Tran, who is the architectural rep for Northern California. He's helping with just the mechanics of the presentation, checking people in, keeping people muted, tracking the chat. So just a quick plug for him. So he deals with the design community up in the Northern California area. So architects, designers, people that are trying to make something and they're not exactly sure what their options are, what the capabilities are of Marvin, maybe need some details. He is the guy to get in touch with. So you're welcome to reach out to him directly or to Matthew or myself or any of your TMs and just say, hey, I need to get in touch with the architectural rep. One caveat there, if you're in Southern California, then we have a different architectural rep for Southern Cal. But one way or the other, if you're in the design community, we do want to link you up with one of our 2 architectural reps. So thanks for that. Just a few notes here. Due to the amount of content, we're going to answer questions at the end. So we have blueprint, pitfalls, and practices is the focus of the class. As Matthew said, it could be a little bit dry because it's just technical. This is all technical stuff. However, we have 19 pitfalls and then 19 practices that will help you avoid those pitfalls. And hopefully you all enjoyed our little graphic with the Pitfall video game from the 80s. But because of that, we only have about a few minutes per pitfall. We're going to try to keep it around a little over 50 minutes, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So if you don't mind, just plug in any questions you have in the chat, and then we'll tackle those at the end. We did say in the class description that this was not a takeoff class, but we did want to explain that here from the get-go, that we are assuming that you know how to do a takeoff. This is just a set of practices that will hopefully make it that you do better takeoffs, as well as having some estimating strategy kind of stuck in here and there. Dealer versus trades, we had initially wanted to make it that one of the classes was going to be for dealers and one were going to be trades. At this point, it's kind of mixed together. So if you are a GC or an estimator or even an architect, I think there's a lot for you to learn here. And it's always good to know how a salesperson operates and how a dealer operates as far as putting these packages together, because they are very complex. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But there's going to be certain things that are very dealer speak. We might talk about the quoting software, OMS, that sort of thing. Please bear with us on that, because a lot of that stuff is more on the dealer side. And then the final note before we jump in is this is the first time we've given this class. We've given versions of it, but this is the first time we've really built it out and made it exclusively about, pitfalls around doing takeoffs and working with blueprints and product selection. So we welcome your feedback. We really would love to hear any thoughts you all have, any pitfalls maybe that we didn't cover that you've run into, and we will happily integrate that into the class. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first section we're going to tackle is pitfalls around the quote itself. So this is the mechanics of the quote. So we're going to jump into the first pitfall.
Yes.
All right, so the first pitfall, and we're starting with the basics, but this is while doing the takeoff, you miss things because you keep getting distracted. Or what often happens is you actually don't end up missing anything by the end, but you've also had to redo or recover multiple sections of the plans because you were interrupted and you didn't want to miss something. So you had to go back on an entire wall or an elevation and make sure you got every single note that you needed. So our practice here, and this is, again, not a takeoff class. We're not going to get into a whole discussion of how to do a proper takeoff. But the practice in this case is simply try to do a takeoff in such a way that you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it, and you get into a habit of doing it a certain way every time. Because realistically, you're going to get interrupted when you're working on doing a takeoff. So if you do it the same way every time, it gets easier and easier to pick up where you left off. So if you look at the graphic that we have to the left here, and by the way, you can zoom in on these graphics. Our marketing specialist pointed that out after our first presentation this morning. So there should be like 3 dots somewhere on your screen that you could zoom in on this graphic if you want to see anything more. But in this case, labeling northeast, southwest before you even start, is a nice little trick. Doors are blue, windows are green, stuff like that. If you get into certain practices and say, hey, I'm going to make it that I have a set process for how I do these takeoffs, then that's really going to help you. I will say, too, just a quick plug, highly recommend getting a PDF editor, even if you have to pay for it. Free editors are fine. You can kind of wiggle around and do some commenting and stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're willing to pay, you'll see some stuff that we used a PDF editor for, and it really does help. So just a little plug as far as tools are concerned. All right, so the next pitfall is when you look back on your quote and you don't know why you did certain things. So as Marvin reps, we deal with a lot of large jobs, a lot of high-end jobs, and I've seen jobs just in a little over 4 years. I've seen jobs take just under 3 years to close from the time we initially started talking about them to the time that it turned into an order. So in that case, you really want to track your own quoting logic of why did we do this? I'm sure the longer you've been doing this, the more often you've looked back and said, why did we do it that way? I remember we had a couple conversations, but I don't exactly know why we quoted it a certain way. The example we're giving here is actually marking it up on the plans themselves. So you would have a master copy of the plans that would be marked up with a bunch of notes. So in this case, we need structure over top of the sliding door. We can't just put a 12038 transom above. The architect drew it that way, but we're going to need to put a 6x6 post in there, and then we're going to have to cap it. So not only do I notate that the 6x6 post is in there, but we also notate that that's changing the size of the transom, because the challenge is when you're looking at your OMS printout, you don't have those notes. So all you see is that it doesn't match the plans, because you might have a 32-inch transom or a 38-inch transom, whatever it is, and it's different from what is called out here. I'm assuming the 3.8 is 3 foot 8 inches, but we'll get into that later as a different pitfall, because in Marvin callouts that could be 38 inches. So follow your quoting logic. and it'll make it a lot easier 4 months later to kind of figure out why you did certain things. All right, this is kind of a cousin of that one, which is when you make changes to the plans, sometimes with multiple iterations of a change, and then you fail to document that change process. So I ran into this on one job in particular that really stuck. It probably took about 9 months to place the order. We started it in April, and then we ended up, can everybody hear me? I just got a note that somebody can't hear anything.
I hear you perfectly.
Okay.
I hear you perfectly as well. I'll try to help Ryan offline.
Okay, thanks. So, so in this case, we worked and worked and worked, meetings, but one of the changes that had been made is that the plans were one light originally. And then at some point, the homeowner said, I want to have SDLs. And then as that developed, they decided they wanted a cottage pattern that was going to have a simulated check rail and that cottage top style of SDLs. So everything continues to proceed. The product gets ordered. Sure enough, we get a call from the GC like 6 months after the product has been on site. So it's been sitting in crates and shipping containers. And he says, hey, these are wrong. And of course, your first instinct is to say, okay, well, let's look at the plans and start there. And we open up the plans and they're all one light. They're not even close to something that we could use to cross-check this SDL pattern, because there wasn't even an SDL. And that was the lesson for me that I learned is whenever you make changes to the plans, that really is a big deal. So you want to notate it. You want to have it that by the time you get to the placing the order, you've got a nice little document as a dealer. But even if you're an estimator and you're a GC, you've got a document saying, these are the changes we made. These are when we made them. And let's review these changes before we place the order, because we are changing the plan. So we're no longer able to then refer back to the plans on these items. And it really does make your life a lot easier when you place that order button. The final thing I'm going to say here as far as the mechanics of quoting is going to be avoid fast quoting. This isn't necessarily something you're going to do over a full set of plans, but I'm guilty of it. I just did it a few weeks ago. Somebody called me. They needed a price on a modern window. They had quoted it as ultimate. They just needed a quick price. I gave it to them. And then a day later, I realized, wait a minute, the window he wanted me to mock up was tempered, and the quick price I gave him in 45 seconds was not tempered. So, that's just the most recent instance. It's just something that has burned me multiple times, which is just that quick quote over the phone, hurry type of thing. So I just encourage you, anytime somebody is asking you to give them a price, just slow down, say, hey, I'm sorry, but I need to actually quote that, or I have a process for that. I have certain standards that I have to meet. However you want to phrase it, use your own language to do it. But at the same time, you just want to hit the brakes, because so often you give that person the quick number because they need it, and then you quoted the wrong thing for one reason or another.
Okay, I'm going to take it from here. Okay, first we have the pitfalls around specifications. You want to make sure to ask the questions. Let's get into good habits and try to help our builder partners and also homeowners get it right from the start. Okay, schedules versus elevations versus floor plans. This may seem like an odd one. You'd expect all of those to be exactly the same, but I think we all know a little bit better. You want to make sure the window schedule, the door schedule match the plans. I've had or I've seen elevations drawn with arched windows, and then when I look at the window schedule, it has no mention of an arch top window whatsoever. I've also seen elevations drawn with divided lights, and the window schedule shows a completely different light configuration, kind of like what Rick was mentioning there. At this point, you have to stop, slow down, dig in, find out what the spec should be, and avoid quoting out the wrong product. In general, the elevation drawings should trump all other documents, but make sure to point out the discrepancies with everyone involved. Okay, so we're going to try to avoid quoting from the window schedule only. I know this is kind of it's hard to do sometimes because it's just right there. It's so easy to do this, to only look at the window schedule. But the elevations, the floor plans, the notes, and the details all have very important information as well that you need to consider for a very accurate bid. Okay, this one, there's a lot of information on this slide, not on the slide, but I'll be presenting quite a bit of information on this slide, and I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible, more for myself than for you, so don't take offense. Make sure that you are meeting all of the specific performance requirements being called out on the plans. Make sure all of the performance requirements are being addressed, such as the SDC, the performance grade rating, the NFRC ratings. If there are not specific requirements being called out, again, make sure to ask the questions. If they say no, no requirements, then make sure you're adding a note, no requirements given, and adding that to your bid. This is going to save you from many uncomfortable conversations later on in the process. Okay, let's do a quick overview of what these ratings are. A performance grade or PG rating is achieved if the product complies with the structural load requirements and all other performance requirements, such as air infiltration resistance, water penetration resistance, ease of operation, and resistance to forced entry. The image here on the left is in the yellow. You can see the image was pulled off of a spec and is actually showing a commercial job where the performance grade is a 30. So it's just something to notate. Basically, DP or design pressure ratings measure the strength of a window. It will tell you how well your windows and doors will stand up to high winds or heavy snow, for instance, if you're in that type of climate. The higher the DP rating, the stronger the window and door is going to be. So sound transmission class, or STC, basically it's measuring the vibrations moving through a surface. I had a situation where the plans called out for an STC rating that was a little bit too high for Marvin to actually achieve, even with our interior storm panels. The homeowner lived near a freeway and was looking for a cone of silence situation for his bedroom to be as quiet as possible. I could have just let it go and not bid the project, but I dug in a little bit. I contacted the homeowner and we found out that the interior storm panel values worked fine for him and also for his project. If just saying it out again, if you don't ask the question, you won't know if you can possibly bid that project. The National Fenestration Rating Council is a nonprofit organization that develops and administers energy ratings and certification programs for energy performance of windows and doors. In California, we are mainly focused on U values and solar heat gain coefficient to comply with our California Title 24. Please check the performance summary report in OMS to see if you are meeting the listed requirements. If you are not seeing the values that you're looking for in the performance summary, then reach out to us. Say, hey, why am I not seeing the value on this window? we may be able to give you the actual value, or at least let you know why you cannot achieve the requested value on a specific product. Just by adding an SDL, a simulated divided light, to a window, you are going to be changing these values. So be aware of that, please. Okay, when looking at glass specs, pay attention to the notes. Sometimes the glass specs are listed in the notes versus on the window schedule itself. If you change the glass, be sure to check the energy values of the new glass. This happens so many times. You've quoted a project, and then for some reason or other, the glass spec gets changed, and the new glass, for some reason or other, does not meet the performance values needed on the project. They may not be aware of that, so be careful and point it out to them as quickly as possible. You may need to, on a side note, you may need to send up an assistance request for any custom glass specs. So this will add time to your process of quoting. So be aware of that as much as possible. Okay, when a spec is confusing, pause the process and work on getting the answer you need to clarify the confusing spec. If no one knows, try to ask the decision maker to make that decision for you. You don't want to jump in and make the decision and obviously be wrong. Try to avoid quoting every possible iteration as well. I've seen plans calling out sash sizes versus frame sizes. Make sure to get the correct measurement method to enter into OMS. If not, you may end up having to requote, or the worst case scenario is potentially reordering product. If we see, just take a look at the little picture here on the side here, a 2.6 window is not the same thing as a 26-inch wide window. If you don't know what it says, reach out, find out why. I've also seen specs called out for casement windows, only to find out much later in the process that the architect wanted in-swing windows rather than the more commonly used out-swing casement windows. As you know, this will definitely dramatically increase the price of your project. Okay, pitfalls around code requirements. The goal with local building codes is to prevent someone from getting hurt. That's really what it's there for. The last thing you or anyone on the project wants to do is to have something go wrong. So let's try to do it right. Okay, you don't need to be an expert on all of the local code requirements, but try to make it part of your process. Walk through the code requirements as part of your takeoff, as part of the process in your takeoff. For code requirements that vary, such as WOCDs or WUI glass, be sure everyone is on the same page with choices prior to making that order. Ideally, this involves the GC discussing that choice with the local code official. Remember that local code does trump any national codes. A WOCD is the safety feature that is designed to lessen the risk of accidental falls. So if you don't see it on the plans or the notes, make sure to ask the question and potentially use that product on some second story windows. It's definitely going to make it safer. Egress is not only to escape from a bedroom, it's also about firefighters getting into a bedroom. Bedrooms need to have at least one window or door with a minimum clear net opening of 5.7 square feet. So when thinking about tempering, you want to find out how far off the ground or the floor the window is going to be from the inside of the home and as well as the outside of the home. I had yet another situation where the grade on the outside changed and the glass, it became then that grade changed. So now the glass was less than 18 inches off of the exterior grade, and therefore they needed to use tempered windows instead of the annealed glass that was being used. So find out if how close a door swing is to a window. That's obviously you're going to need to temper that window if it's within the 24 inches. Is the job site zoned for WUI glass? Great question. I had yet another situation where a client, or if they were in a WUI zone, and I looked into it, found out that the client was just right on the border. I explained this to the homeowner, and the client, they decided to spend the extra money to go for the WUI glass just for their own peace of mind. And I felt great about it because I had that conversation with them. I brought it up, and they were excited about the fact that they were going to be making their house a little bit safer for themselves. Okay, discussing sills during the takeoff is an important part of the process. How are sills going to interact with the subflooring and the finished floor? I like to send detailed drawings of what the sills will look like to avoid issues down the road. A contractor one time ordered the low profile sill on a sliding patio door, and after the installation, the doors, they were leaking. So we went out to the job site and looked at the installation, and there were actually pavers right up against the exterior sill, and it was completely burying the weeps at the side of the windows, and it's obviously going to be leaking if you're burying the weeps. I've also had an installer ask me if they could cut off that triangle on the bottom of the low profile sill that we see here on the left. The answer to this question is always no. You definitely cannot cut off that little triangle. That is your water management, and you cut that off and your door will be leaking. Okay, walls can be very complicated. When looking at the plans of a multi-slide door with a pocket, these walls need to be extremely well planned out. A 4-panel unidirectional pocketed multi-slide door is going to require a substantial wall to accommodate the pocket. Of course, the pans involved will also need to kind of slide in and into that pocket to avoid water from leaking into the wall. I was called out on another job site, and real world scenario here, where the contractor was planning to install a 6-panel pocketed multi-slide door on a second story. Again, 6 panels on a second story. The second story exterior wall was supported with a steel I-beam, but the door had absolutely no support under the pocket, which is where which is sitting inside of that exterior wall. So the contractor actually had to spend a lot more time and budget for additional materials for blocking the floor joist to support the weight of those 6 panels. When all of those panels are stacked up there, that was a tremendous amount of weight and really needed to be supported. By slowing down and looking at the plans, we could have potentially caught this before the site inspection. If no details are available, I fully recommend getting shop drawings of your specific door. don't settle on just generic shop drawings or generic detail drawings. Discuss the details with the GC, the homeowner, and the installer if possible. All three parties, they're all going to have different perspectives, and they're going to need to understand what that final product is going to look like, and also how it will affect the wall and floor conditions. Oh, Rick, did you want to take
I'll jump in on the scenic screen piece because I've had multiple jobs where things went haywire with scenic screens. So if you look at the detail there to the right, you'll see that so what we're looking at there is the side jamb. You see the handle there, and you see that the canister for the scenic screen, which is what's going to hold the screen material, is actually wider than the width of the frame of the door. And that is counterintuitive, and a lot of people just don't expect it. The most extreme issue I've had with it is a job where I was called out and they were like, hey, we're having problems with the scenic screen. Can you come and try to give us some advice? I go, it's the contractor, the homeowner, the installer, the dealer, and myself. So it's one of those big meetings where everybody's there, and they had literally installed a multi-slide. They had put flooring in, they had drywalled it, and now they were sitting there saying, how do we attach the screen? And I'm looking at a door that now, I have to give the bad news of, you guys have to rip the floor up because the sill track at the bottom is actually deeper than this low profile sill you're using. And you also have to break the drywall up because the canisters for the scenic screen have to be wider than the door. So not a pleasant conversation at all. And while the GC was the one that ended up having to do the work, because unfortunately for him, the scenic screen was literally just sitting in the garage. They hadn't even opened it yet. The dealer, for future reference, I guarantee you he will never let that happen again. He would say, hey, scenic screen, alarm bells would go off. We need to get a shop drawing, and we need to look at the shop drawing of what this is going to look like. So just a quick plug for some of our services there. First of all, our tech department does awesome details. That detail right there is a tech department detail for us internally. That's not something you just pull out of the ADM. We also, architectural detail manual. We also now have a sister company, PBS, Precision Building Supply Solutions, that is available to do installs. And one of the areas around install that we can offer a lot of value is scenic doors, because we know them really well. We also have, as part of PBS, an engineering arm. So if in the case of Matthew's story, where you go on site for a remodel and you see the plan is to have 6 panels stacked on a second floor, and you look underneath the floor and you see that there's parallel joists running and there's no beam. They're literally just sitting on plywood, basically. We would also be able to engineer that and give you an engineering stamp. So, obviously that's not the focus of this presentation, but we definitely want to at least mention it. When you get a little deep where it's a little bit intimidating, we do offer a lot of stuff to try to help you through these types of situations.
Okay, and for bifold configurations, you need to consider the man door and how that man door is going to open. I had a situation where a client ordered a 4-panel bifold door for a pool house, and the man door was absolutely not considered at all. You had to actually walk around the corner and go in through a separate opening because you could not open that man door from the outside. It was extremely embarrassing, and the homeowner was not happy at all, to say the least. Walk through the different ways a bifold door can be designed, discuss the difference between stacking panels and a man door, talk about how the width of the door affects the number of panels and also the exterior access. This graphic over here on the left, it is showing just the uneven options. And before the presentation, we counted and we had over 80 possible configurations that this bifold door can actually have. So I think that's tremendous. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've had a similar situation to that where there was no exterior access, and our quote will say on it if one of our bifolds has no exterior access, but it is in the notes, and it's sometimes missed because you know how it is. The lines on a quote, just one item, a casement, let's say, still has 20 lines underneath it describing that casement. So sometimes the line that says no exterior access on a bifold gets missed. So the next category we're going to talk about here for pitfalls is going to be pitfalls around special products. So these are going to be custom products that you can't quote just in the software. There's something special about them where you have to get special pricing. So the first pitfall, just to get this one kind of out of the way, is sometimes you don't need to quote special product. So sometimes people will spend time quoting product that actually is either out of the budget or there's just acceptable standard alternatives. So the example I'm giving here to the left, the far left door is a 3/4 light. That's the style of our standard panel door. Neither of these are Marvin doors. I wanted color pictures and I just didn't have a color picture of a half light door that I could use. Because the half-light door is not a standard option for us. We can do it, but we actually mocked up some pricing before this presentation for a 3080 door. If you want to change it from the standard 3/4 light to half-light, it's about a $1,200 adder. However, some people would be perfectly fine with the 3/4 light door. They might have called out a half light, but when you actually ask them, hey, before we go down the road of quoting this special door, this is the standard, are you up for this? We see that too with custom colors. People start with a custom color, they quote it, they do all this kind of stuff, and then it ends up that before the order gets placed, it's changed to one of the 19 Marvin colors. So real practice here is just identify a special product, but then actually discuss it and say, do we need to make this special? Are there options that would be acceptable? That you would be happy with before we go down the road of quoting it special. All right, the next pitfall around special product is missing the fact that product is either not buildable as drawn, or it's buildable but pushing the limits of our capabilities, or whoever the manufacturer is, their capabilities. So the first one, if you look here, is this was actually drawn on a job that we were asked to, or at least the dealer was asked to quote as an essential job. And if you can read it, it's 184 inches wide by 145 inches tall. You've got trapezoids across the top. I mean, cool window wall, but it is way beyond what Essential is capable of. As much as I'm a fan of the Essential line, I think it's a great line, but this is just beyond it. So as an estimator, it never hurts, or actually it's always good to, before you start keying in numbers and listing stuff, is just say, hey, is this buildable the way that it's drawn, and the way that they're calling this out? And you will catch things fairly regularly where it's like, well, hey, we need to discuss these openings before I even start quoting anything, because technically we're going to have to break this up, put some structure in there before we can quote this as an essential job, which is what they ended up doing on this job. They broke it up and they're going to have some of this stuff in separate openings. Part two of that is we have had one job in particular, but it's definitely been a lesson for me, where we had a huge XOX assembly, about 40-inch wide by 90-inch tall push-out casements with a fixed window in the middle, 3/8-inch MRF maul. It all came as one assembly, massive assembly. And the system initially said, no, you can't build this, it's too big. We put in a special request to have it built. Marvin okayed it. And the challenge was, it really was pushing Marvin's capabilities. And that's saying something, because Marvin really is amazing from an engineering perspective. The jams are engineered jams. I mean, on and on things Marvin does to make really quality product. So we ended up, we had to get a new frame. Our techs had to visit there a couple times. It took a while to get this window dialed in. credit to Marvin. Marvin warranties everything it makes. There's no fine print in Marvin's warranty that says, hey, if you do something that's off the menu, you're not going to be covered. And that is absolutely the case with some other manufacturers. However, even if we cover it, we still wished several times that we had at least said to the GC, hey, by the way, we're pushing the capabilities here. We're going to do it, but we're pushing the capabilities. Just that one little explanation would have saved us some heartache, because at least everybody would have understood, hey, we knew we were pushing the boundaries, now we just have to fix it, as opposed to, hey, why are these windows still having trouble opening and closing? You know, those kind of conversations. So if you do push, if you do get special stuff, tell people, hey, this is special. You know, we're going to try to, we're going to make it work, but, you know, please be aware of that. All right, the next pitfall around special product, and this will come home to a lot of you, is missing deadlines because the product's not ID'd early as needing special pricing. So our internal team can quote some stuff that's special very quickly. If you need white laminated glass, usually that's about, let's say, two days turnaround, okay? But if you look at this really cool door in this picture, which is an all aluminum door that's being made to look like a V-groove panel door, is very special, okay? There's no glass. It's just not your typical Marvin door. Something like this could take a couple weeks, if not a month, to quote, because you have to go back and forth. You have to get, you know, the grooves right. What, you know, how is this going to be spaced out? You know, what's the hardware going to be? You know, how is it going to, how are the grooves going to interact with the style and the rail? You know, what's that going to look like? And we get calls, I'm sure Matthew can attest, all the time with somebody that has 3 days to submit a bid, or 2 days, or it's due that next day, and they have special product on there, and they're being asked, and they're saying, oh, I need to hurry up and get pricing on this. So the pitfall is just not, or the practice, excuse me, is when you first get the plans, take a look at it in the same way that you're going to say, hey, is this logical? Should we even go with special product? And is it pushing the limits? Part 3 of that is just saying, okay, we do need it to quote it special. There's no alternatives that are acceptable, and it is buildable. But part 3 is, let's go ahead and get this rolling. Even if I'm not going to start this quote for another 10 days, because I've got 2 weeks to submit it, I've got other things on my plate. But right away, I'm going to at least identify the things that need special quoting and then get those submitted. Get those up to the factory, or get them to my rep, or whatever you need to do to start the process to get those things quoted. All right, the next is going to be pitfalls around installation. So obviously, and you all probably realize, like, we could do a whole class on performance ratings. We could do a whole class on installation details. We could do a whole class around a lot of this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to hit the highlights here. But one pitfall around installation is not communicating key installation details. Knockdown doors is one of them. We mentioned the one earlier about the, it's not really an installation detail, kind of, about no exterior access. But knockdown door is one that I've learned to pay attention to, because I've gotten the call of, you know, a bunch of big 9'6" sliding doors that it said right there on the quote, these are knockdowns. So the dealer was covered, but at the same time, because of course the homeowner or the GC wanted, you know, reparations or whatever, because they needed to take way more time to put these doors in than they realized they were going to have to. So the dealer was covered because it said right there on the quote, hey, these doors are knocked down. But again, you're giving more value if you point that out when you're submitting the bid. There's another example here on a frame expander, just something where if you decide to do certain installation details, you need to be sure to include that with your bid. And then the final one is prep for field mull. Marvin has a really nice feature now where we will prep stuff for a field mull, but you just have to let people know, because they might be expecting it all to come as one assembly, because that's what it looks like on the bid. But again, there's a nice little phrase in there that says prep for field mull, which means we're going to be breaking this up. The other thing, and I'll just kind of leave it as a general thing, but please discuss interior finish details. So many times it's just ordered as just a full frame or full frame with extension jam or whatever the case may be, and that discussion never happens, is what are your interior finishing details? Okay. This is a lovely detail because this actually shows an interior that can have a bullnose drywall return and an exterior that can have a bullnose stucco return. So in this case, the exterior is has what we call a wood buck around the interior. If you see those 2x4s, that enables you to install the window recessed into the wall and actually use your nail fin, like a nail fin installation. So you can now flash that nail fin. It's a nice way of doing it, but you do lose room in your rough opening by putting that 2x4 buck in there, which of course, as an estimator, that's key. You don't want to order windows that are too big. On the interior, I had a job where I was actually supposed to show up and say, hey, how, I was supposed to give a little class on how do you flash this. And then it turned out that nobody had caught that you had one of these stepped recess details. So the extension jam poked too far into the interior. Thankfully, it was extension jam. It wasn't full frame. So they were able to go through and pull all the extension jam prior to finishing it, but it still was a hassle. All right, and then the final pitfall is going to be pitfalls around the choice of product. And this, yet again, could be an entire class all by itself, is how to navigate choosing the right product for the job, okay? So, but since it's blueprints, but there's estimating strategy to some of this. So we just wanted to throw this one in. But the pitfall is quoting a product that doesn't fit the project. The most extreme example I've had as a TM is I got a list forwarded to me by a homeowner. I hope it was a homeowner, not a GC. And it literally asked for 6 brands to be quoted. But then it said, can we also have a push out version of each brand? So you had a crank out version and a push out version. So the request was for 12 different quotes for this job. And credit to Pat White, I was able to attend some of his training sessions when I first became a Marvin rep. And his big philosophy, which I've taken to heart and made it part of my philosophy, is find the right product for the job first. Figure out what the homeowner wants, what they don't want. I have a list here, performance, you have capabilities, you have sizing, you have finishes, you have quality, installation considerations, you have aesthetics. There's a lot of categories of a window and door package. And as you move through those categories and try to figure out what they want, you're going to eliminate possibilities and usually land on one that you all agree is probably the best fit for the job. Then quote that. If that's out of the budget, then you can have some further discussions. You can talk about value engineering or this, that, or the other. But guess what? By spending a little time early, you've made it so you don't have to do 5 different versions of the quote, so on and so forth. The final note I'll say on that is I get it. It's not the easiest thing sometimes a lot of these practices take time to practice them because you need to hit the brakes sometimes, or you need to deviate and say, hey, why don't we have a design meeting before we quote anything? Or why don't you meet me in the showroom and I'll show you some of these different things. That takes effort, that takes work. There is an art to it. It's not just a straight up science. It does take discussions with people. And I also realize if you have glue chip glass or frost glass and they want obscure glass, sure, you're not going to necessarily say, let's hit the brakes and I can't do anything more until you tell me whether you want frost, because that's $40 more than glue chip or something like that. So I do get that sometimes you're going to say, look, I am going to roll and quote 2 or 3 different iterations because I don't want to get hung up on too small of an item. The problem is when nobody catches it and then it gets ordered wrong. And that's when usually we get involved. And that's why we're able to do a presentation like this, because generally when something goes wrong, we hear about it. So we just want to try to put it all together in one presentation of things that everybody can be aware of so you don't have to learn the hard way.
Okay, thank you. Please enter your questions in the chat box or the chat. And also sign up. Don't forget to sign up for the semi part 2 class of the managing your large projects coming in May. And that's going to be Rick with Marianne. So that'll be a nice little duo there. And please feel free to give us feedback on this. This we haven't done this before, so let us know how we did here, and then also if you have your own pitfall that you want to share with us, put it in the chat or send us an email later or send it to your TM and have them send it to us. We'd love to hear from it. We've learned some things along the way, as well as I'm sure you have. So we'd love to hear your stories that kind of helped you develop into a better salesperson. And thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I appreciate it.